everybody, welcome back to another SUPboarder video. This video we're going to be speaking about the Astron compact range, the Nova boards. We have the 9-foot, the 10-foot and the 11-foot. These are super small foldable boards that are about half the size when they're rolled into their backpack, but you're still going to be able to get into paddleboarding as a first timer or paddle a little bit further. If you're interested in this sort of stuff and want to find out if these boards are right for you, definitely check out this full video. Now, we've reviewed quite a few of the Novas from Astron in the past. This year, like all years, the boards have got a little bit better, a little bit more refined, better shapes, like in this 11-foot, which I'm going to speak about in a minute. If you're new to Astron or new to paddleboarding and you haven't heard of Astron and don't know who they are actually a pretty big player in the paddleboard industry. They've got composite boards, they've got inflatable boards, they've got a huge range of gear and other paddling accessories, foils, wings. There's loads and loads of stuff in the Astron catalogue. They're definitely setting themselves up at the mid to cheaper price point, and they have got a lot of you already on the water. Going into each of these boards in a bit more detail, the Neo Nova is 9 foot long, 28 inches wide. It's a 4.75 inch thick board. The volume is 190 litres because of that. The max rider weight really for that one is going to be 80 kilograms. And you're going to find the retail price at $369, pounds or euros. Looking at the 10-foot Nova, that one is 32 inches wide, 6 inches thick, so it's thicker than the Neo Nova. That brings the volume in at 275 litres. The retail prices are sitting a bit more, around $399 euros. And the max rider really was suggesting around 115 kilos. Looking at the Supernova, which is the 11-foot, that's 32 inches wide, so it's the same width as the 10-foot Nova, 6 inches thick. Retail price for that is $429 or euros. Max rider weight up to about 130 kilograms, but keep watching so I'll give you an idea of who will best suit each board. With all of those boards, you get the same standard packages. You get a nice thin coiled leash. It is an ankle and calf leash, so you can tie it around your ankle or your calf. It's not as heavy duty as the other leashes on the market, so if you are going to be looking to go out in bigger waves or maybe even do a bit more touring, end up using your board in a little bit more of extreme situations, I would definitely upgrade for a thicker leash. But Astron have got loads of leashes as well. But a nice light leash, that's great for just putting in the bag and walking somewhere, keeping the weight down of your overall package and obviously keeping you safe while attached to your board. If you're unsure about leashes, remember, unsure about when you should be using a leash, a quick release leash and other safety equipment, definitely check out our full SUP Safe series on SUPboarder and on YouTube. There's 9 videos in there that give you all the information you need to make sure you are SUP safe when out paddleboarding. Definitely well worth a watch. Looking at the paddles you get with the packages, these are 4-piece aluminium plastic bladed paddles because they have to be shorter to fit into the bag when broken down, so you can actually remove it down into 4 sections. It's an aluminium shaft, as I said, and with a plastic blade. The blade itself is actually quite a nice general entry-level blade into paddleboarding. You're obviously not going to have the stiffest paddle in the world because of all those joints, and it's an aluminium shaft. If you want to go for a more performance paddle, going for a carbon or a glass shaft is going to give you that much more stiffness. It's going to let you paddle further for less effort. But for most people getting into sport, entry level, definitely for your all-rounders going for your 10-foot board here, the paddle's absolutely fine. Handle's nice and small, so it will fit kids, smaller people, and even larger people won't find a problem using a small handle. With the Neo Nova package, because it's gearing up for the lighter paddlers, a bit more of the kids, you get a smaller diameter paddle, and the blade itself is smaller as well, and it doesn't go so high in its overall length. It is gearing up for those lighter people, and that paddle is actually one of my daughter's favourite paddles because it's very easy and light to move around. Looking at the pump you get as standard with all these boards, you get the Astron double action pump, except it's a little bit shorter than the standard double action pump. So it pumps on the upstroke and on the downstroke, and then when the pumping starts to get hard, you can take the red nozzle out the back and just pump on the downstroke. It has an inflate and deflate setting, and it easily gets the boards up to 15 psi, but it's not as easy to use as some other more expensive pumps on the market. Before I jump into giving you some feedback about each of the boards, give you an overview of the construction that Astron use, Astron have got all of their boards in a double chamber. It's pretty much their signature thing they do. A double chamber is where you have a smaller almost board inside the bigger board. You inflate your smaller board first to 15 psi, and then when that's inflated, you can then inflate the outer chamber to 15 psi. This does a number of things. It does give you that extra added safety if you did puncture the outer shell of your board, because you've got that inner smaller chamber. But for us, we personally find it really gives the board a lot more stiffness because there's more material going up and down, especially when you're going to be standing on the board. I'll speak about the deflection test in a minute, but that's really for us more of the advantage to double chamber over the safety aspect. These boards are physically lighter than the other Aztron boards. The reason for that is they are made with a single layer of PVC. So you haven't got as many PVC layers over the top and the bottom of the board. And obviously there is going to be some pros and some cons to having those lighter weight boards. The biggest pro really is it's going to be much easier to transport and move around. The biggest con is it's not going to be as hard wearing, obviously having more layers of material on your board. So maybe if you're super heavy on your kit, you should be looking at boards with more layers of material. For me personally, I still like having a lighter base board. I do a lot of walking with my gear, a lot of carrying it down cliffs. I like having a lighter weight board, and I will pick a lighter board because of that. The fins that these boards have all set up with is a twin fin setup. Comes with Astron's own click-in fin box with a 5-inch fin. It's quite a heavy duty, hard plastic fin, clicks in really nicely, and it has a nice locking system as well. The reason there's two fins on these boards opposed to the one is because when you go to pack this board up, you're going to fold it in half and then roll the board up. That making it much more compact and the backpack smaller overall, opposed to the more traditional board where you just roll it from the nose or the tail and have the width of the board going in the bag. Because it folds up again, that's another reason why the material is a little bit lighter, because you are going to have to allow that PVC to bend in the middle of the board, which is why there's no deck pad in the middle of the board either, so it can be folded very easily over on itself. Looking at some of the features you've got on all of these boards, the graphics have all changed this year, they've been updated. You've still got your front bungees that you can put down your drink, your small dry bag, flip-flops and stuff. You've still got deck pad just around the main standing area. You've got nothing towards the tail at the back of the board. You've got an offset carry handle, which is really neat if you've got long arms or short arms. And also because the board is folded in half, the leashing D-ring is off to one side. So that is standard with all of the three boards. Jumping into the differences between these three boards on the water and who should be looking at what board. The Neo Nova is the lightest board because it's the smallest board and it's not so thick in its overall thickness. The thickness is also really important when it comes to your paddling weight and the conditions you're going to be paddling in. This is why it is a sub 80 kg board, but really we're talking ideally sub 65 kilograms ideally. What I mean by that is if you're an adult and you weigh 80 kilos and you want to buy a board for your kids and they're at 50, 60 kilos, yes, you are going to be able to get on and paddle that board as well, but it's not going to be as efficient as obviously them paddling that board. The good thing about them getting on a thinner board is that they're going to be much closer to the water surface. They're not going to get affected by the wind so much. Generally, they haven't got as much strength as heavier paddlers have. And if those heavier paddlers will need a bit more stiffness in a board, they could go for a 6-inch thick board and they'd have a bit more strength to paddle that thicker board in windier conditions. We'll speak about stiffness and all that sort of stuff in relation to thickness in a minute. Unlike a lot of lighter or kids boards on the market, the Neo Nova still has a little bit of length to it, still 9 foot long. A lot of other boards are around the 8 foot in length. They're all usually around the 28 inches in width, which this one is, but because it's longer, it makes it much easier to paddle in a straighter line. It's faster to paddle in a straighter line. But because it's got the twin fins, it still makes the board really easy to maneuver and turn around. This board is actually one of my daughter's favourite boards that she uses out of all the other kids sort of SUPs we have around in the SUPboarder HQ. She's 8 now and she started using this when she was 6, an older Neo Nova, and it's probably one of her firm favourites because it's light, it's relatively easy to carry because it's got an offset handle, it's easy to paddle in a straight line, but you still can turn it around. The discipline for those lighter paddlers, yeah, you're going to be getting into paddleboarding. It's an all-round paddleboarding shape, but you could also catch a few little waves with that one as well. Looking at the bigger board, the Nova, this is one they've always had in the range. This is your classic all-round size. 10-foot board, 32 inches wide, 6 inches thick. It's going to be able to take a lot more weight because of that extra thickness. It's going to do the same sort of stuff that the Neo Nova is going to do. It's going to paddle in the same sort of way, but it's just going to take that much more weight. Happy for 115 kilos, really happy 95 to 75 kilos. That sort of person is going to really get on with this board. Good all-round shape, nice and wide up at the nose, good bit of width towards the tail. Not going to be the fastest of boards, but it's going to turn around easy. It's going to offer you the right sort of paddling style you're going to want for all types of paddling. You could even catch some small waves with this one as well. Remember, it being 6 inches thick, it's going to get affected by the wind a little bit more, but if you're a heavier paddler, that shouldn't really be a problem. Looking at the bigger Supernova, the 11-foot, the same width as the 10-foot Nova, 32 inches wide, and the same thickness. But you'll notice it's much more pulled in up at the nose and more pulled in towards the tail. It makes it much quicker to paddle. So it is pushing towards somebody who wants to explore that a little bit more, maybe get into a bit of light touring, go around the corner, paddle that a little bit more. Any gain in length in the board is going to give you much more speed. It is going to make the turning around a little bit slower though, but the Supernova does actually turn pretty well for a 11-foot board. So it still could be a good all-round first-time board for lots of paddlers. The big thing to note between the 10-foot and the 11-foot is the 10-foot is still more stable than the 11-foot, even though the 11-foot and the 10-foot are the same width. But because the nose and the tail is a little bit more pulled in on this 11-foot, is going to allow the board to rock from side to side a little bit more. The 10-foot has got wider shoulders, so it stops the water from wrapping up around the nose of the board, which is why you can still get a good amount of weight on the Supernova, but in relation for the extra length, not as much as the standard 10-foot. Yes, you could jump on this if you've got a bit more experience of paddling up to about 130 kilos. Real sweet spot again, 85 to 95, 100 kilograms. Looking at any other paddle observations between the three boards, the 9-foot and the 10-foot paddle like just all-round paddle boards. The 11-foot is a little tiny bit more technical to use. The reason I'm saying that is you can foot steer a paddle board. So if you're paddling on one side, you're leaning on your right or leaning on your left, you will affect how well your board goes in that straight line. The Supernova is a little bit more crucial with how you stand on your left and right leg. The Nova, you just paddle and you go in a straight line. It's a minute difference, but definitely for us, jumping from one to the other, we did notice that if you're heavier on your feet on one side, you're going to find the Supernova a little bit harder to paddle in that straight line, or more technical to paddle in that straight line, opposed to the shorter 10-foot Nova. But don't let all that complicated stuff really put you off. If you're still looking for a board to paddle a little bit further, a little bit faster, and you weigh 85, 90 kilograms, the Supernova is still going to be the best board over the smaller 10-foot Nova. So now I want to move on to our deflection test, which is where we measure the stiffness of the board. This is really interesting because I'm going to speak about the 6-inch thick board and the 4.75-inch thick board. A deflection test is where we put a board on a gap of 1.5 meters apart and we put a weight of 75 kilograms in the middle of the gap, and then we measure how much that board bends. Now, a really bendy board on the market is sitting at about 25 millimeters. A super stiff board on the market is sitting around 7 millimeters. Bear in mind, you're going to be spending a lot of money generally for those stiffer boards. They've got a lot more material in them. There's a lot more R&D. There's a lot more extra materials down the rails, and that will make a difference. These are generally quite lightweight boards for you to physically carry. They're not going to be the stiffest boards on the market. If we're looking at the differences between a 6-inch thick and a 4.75-inch thick, you will see there's quite a big difference. Your standard Nova, pumped up to 15 psi, had a deflection test of 14 millimeters, which is very representable. Being a single layer board of its weight, it has got the double chamber, which really does make a difference. And looking at the Neo Nova, that board dropped 23 millimeters with a weight of 75 kilograms on the top. So you can see the board is not as stiff. It's the same construction, same materials, but the thickness of the board doesn't make it as stiff. That's the same with all paddle boards across the industry in inflatable paddle boards. The thicker the board, the stiffer it is. The narrower board, the thinner the board, the more flexible it will be. But the better it will be to paddle in windier conditions, especially if you're lighter. Don't think that deflection is sort of something to worry about. It is a more bendy board, yes, but it's a lighter person's board. 60, 65, 55, 50 kilograms lighter, it's not going to be a problem. At 75 kilograms, it's not going to give you that much performance, but you are going to be able to paddle it. So it's just something to be aware about. It's not a negative, it's just what we'd expect of a thinner board at the same construction of these other boards. Now I'm going to move on to some negatives of the Nova range of boards, because there are some negatives you need to be aware of this year. Only small, to be honest, not massive negatives. Silly things like the handle on the Neo Nova was unfortunately not balanced in the center, which is pretty crucial for a kid's SUP because kids struggle to carry their paddleboards anyway, and unfortunately it was back at the tail of the board. But this wasn't the case with the rest of the boards, and my daughter has actually got an older Neo Nova and the handle is perfectly balanced. Other observation is the reduced deck pad is great at keeping the weight down of the board, which is very important. But if you are going to be playing around, moving your feet towards the back of the board, doing step back turns, you haven't got very much grip back there and you are going to find it slippy. You could put some wax on it, but it's an observation that if you're going to be doing those sort of maneuvers, there's no grip at the back on these boards. Keeping a look at the deck pad, the deck pads on the Supernova and the Nova were absolutely perfect, but there was a little bit of EVA deck pad unrolling on the Neo Nova, which we had to stick back down. A small thing, but it is a negative we've noted. The bag itself fits the board in easily, but it's not a very comfortable bag if you're going to be carrying long distances. You're going to have to pad the bag out with your clothes, with your towel. Easily done. This is something you have to do. It's been one of the negatives in the past, but to be honest, it's a lightweight bag. It does keep the weight down the overall package, but it's not as comfortable to use. The other interesting observation is the pump is a two-way pump, which you'll need to suck the air out of the board so you can roll it up nice and small. But because it's a two-way pump, when you go to inflate your board, it does sometimes suck your loose clothing or your jacket in through the hole in the handle, which does stop you pumping. So it makes it a little bit harder to pump. And the last negative, unfortunately, there's still a lot of plastic in the Astron package. We're good to reduce that, like other brands have done, get some paper in there, because yes, you can recycle plastic, but it's a lot harder to do than letting paper biodegrade. So definitely that will be something we'd like to see changed in the future Astron. But moving on to some pros away from those cons, speaking about the quality overall of these boards, because that has always been a negative in the past reviews from Astron. We've always been saying how the quality isn't up there compared to other brands. Yes, the deck pad is rolling off a little bit on the Neo Nova, but the actual finish of these boards when it comes to the PVC rails, the internal double chamber, the sticking on around the bungee system is much better than the previous year's Astrons. We can clearly see that more work has gone into the finishing of the actual board itself. So the deck pad, a small roll where it hasn't had enough glue, but the board itself is much better than previous year's boards. A major pro is the boards do all work really well. The small board is great for the kids and lighter paddler. The 10-foot is a good all-round board that's easy to use, and the Supernova is a faster board with much more glide that is going to offer that person a light, compact board at a good price point still, but it's going to be able to travel that much further and faster. The stiffness of all these boards is very good, and that's due to the double chamber, but they're still nice and lightweight and easy to carry because it is a single layer board. So Astron have still got to work on a few things to make their products even better, but we have seen a good improvement for 2023, and that's nice to see. And we'll definitely carry on seeing a lot of you buying these as first-time boards or buying them as lighter, more compact boards to go alongside maybe your more performance boards. As always, if you've got any comments on these boards or previous Astron boards, please let us know. That's always very important to us bringing these reviews together. Remember, if you're watching this video and you're completely new to paddleboarding or you don't know how to be SUP safe on the water, definitely check out our SUP safe videos. Very quick, to the point, and give you the right information to make sure you will be safe on the water. I hope you found this review interesting and informative, and we'll see you on another SUPboarder video soon.